Hi Glitter Mama, this is Rebecca from ChemKnits continuing our discussion on knitting charts. Here I have a Boston Red Sox B and then one of the Fenway convertible mitts that I made with this chart. And this was a case where I had made the chart first, but then I really wanted to make sure it would fit on the back of a mitten. And so I took the number of stitches that were the width of the chart and knew that I needed at least that many stitches plus a few more on either side of the back of the mitten. And so then, knowing like the size that I needed the mitten to be, I calculated the gauge that I would need, so how tightly I would need to knit, so that way I could fit the chart on the back of the mitten. So I guess this is one example of where I started with the chart and then I adjusted the project so that way the chart would fit on the project. In the second example, I have, so the gauge of the chart doesn't matter as much as the total number of stitches in the chart. So for example here, this is Indy's Christmas stocking, the top of the chart, and my Christmas stocking. And they both have the same number of stitches. I believe that there's 70, that the entire width is 70 stitches. So you see 35 stitches on one side of the stocking. And so I knew that that was the width that I wanted for the stocking, and so then I designed all the charts based on that. But when you look at the final stockings, Indy's stocking is smaller than mine. And that's because I knit Indy's stocking, see if you can see, with a tighter gauge and smaller yarn. So I use smaller needles and smaller yarn. So using the identical, basically an identical pattern, and, well, not identical charts, but the identical size charts, I ended up with a smaller, I have a smaller resulting chart. Now, one thing you can do is if, for example, with the snowflake, which takes up, basically the whole 35 stitch width, if I wanted it to appear smaller over the whole size of the stocking, then what I would need to do is increase the number of stitches that I have to keep a stocking of the same size but make this chart appear smaller. So rather than having 35 stitches on a side, maybe I would need to have 70 stitches on a side, and so use smaller yarn and a lot smaller needles, and then the stocking would take up, would be shrunk by, would probably be take up, I guess, a quarter of the space that it currently takes up. So that's a way that changing your gauge and changing the total number of stitches in your product could affect the overall proportion of the chart to the project. This is a sneak peek at a new design that I haven't yet released. This is an iPad case, and in this case, no pun intended, I measured my mom's iPad and I calculated, based on my gauge, how many stitches I would need to make a case that would fit it. So I think my gauge was 5.5 stitches per inch, and I don't remember off the top of my head how many stitches I have here, but I think it's about 10 inches long. And so I made a grid that had the exact number of stitches that I'm going to end up with in the project, and then I used that grid to start designing the chart, which had some like turtles dancing, and on the other side like another turtle and some fun stuff. But so this is a case where I started with the gauge of the final project because I had the yarns and I knew what needles I wanted to knit it on, and then I back calculated based on the size that I needed it to be, how many stitches I would have, and then based on how many stitches I knew I would have, I went and designed the chart. And this is probably the best way to make sure that your project will fit. I hope, I didn't show any like sample calculations here, but I hope that maybe explaining this verbally has helped a bit. And once again, Glitter Mama, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I am happy to try to answer your questions.